Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
This time, we're taking you on a journey
Okay.
through early American history.
All right.
But instead of the usual textbook rundown,
All right.
we're going for those hidden gems.
Yeah.
The surprising stories and forgotten figures.
I like it.
We've got a stack of excerpts from a U.S. history textbook here. And I'm excited to see what we uncover.
It's amazing what you find when you kind of dig beneath the surface.
Yeah.
We often have these set narratives about the past, but these sources offer a chance to challenge those assumptions.
Absolutely.
And uncover a richer, more nuanced understanding of early America.
Absolutely. And what better place to start than before colonial America? I think many people picture,
Right.
Yeah, small scattered tribes.
Yeah.
But these sources suggest something far more complex.
Yes, it's easy to fall into that trap of oversimplification.
Right.
Take the Olmec civilization, for example. These were master sculptors creating colossal heads from basalt boulders.
Wow.
Imagine trying to carve a head 11 feet tall,
Oh my God.
weighing 50 tons.
That's
It's mind-boggling.
more than just mind-boggling. What does that tell us about their society
Yeah.
and capabilities?
It speaks volumes about their level of social organization, engineering prowess,
Right.
and artistic skill.
Wow.
Moving and shaping those massive stones
Yeah.
would have required a tremendous amount of coordinated effort and expertise.
It definitely paints a different picture, doesn't it?
It does.
And then there's Teotihuacan,
Yes.
this sprawling city that rivaled European cities in size and
Yeah.
complexity during the same period.
Teotihuacan was truly remarkable.
Yeah.
A thriving metropolis with over 100,000 inhabitants.
Wow.
We're talking about a city with apartment compounds, elaborate temples,
Oh, wow.
and massive pyramids all connected by a network of streets and trade routes.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. The sources mention ongoing debates about the ethnicity of Teotihuacan's people. What's the significance of that?
It challenges this idea of a homogeneous pre-colonial America,
Right.
suggesting a more intricate reality.
Okay.
Perhaps it was a multi-ethnic society, a
Interesting.
melting pot of cultures centuries before European contact.
Wow.
It throws a whole new light on the dynamics of this period.
Speaking of cultural exchange, the development of slavery is often misunderstood. Right. Many assume the transatlantic slave trade was the only form.
Yeah.
But these sources highlight early forms in Africa itself.
That's a crucial distinction to make.
Yeah.
These weren't the brutal race-based chattel slavery systems that would define the Americas.
Yeah.
Instead, we see systems tied to debt,
Yep.
protection, or even famine.
Interesting.
These forms of servitude were often temporary and allowed for a certain level of social mobility.
So how did we get from these systems to the transatlantic slave trade?
Right.
What drove that horrific shift?
Well, several factors kind of coalesced.
Yeah.
When the Spanish arrived in the Americas, they initially attempted to enslave the indigenous population, but faced with resistance and devastating disease outbreaks,
Right.
they sought a more reliable workforce.
Right. And their focus on profit was key, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
They were driven by the need for a large, permanent,
Yeah.
and easily controlled labor force
Right.
to exploit the resources of the New World.
Absolutely. Combine that with the Catholic Church's stance against enslaving Christians.
Right.
And you have this horrific convergence of factors that led to the African slave trade.
Wow.
It becomes a tragic story of how economic motives, religious justifications, and ultimately racial prejudice intersected to create a system of unimaginable cruelty.
It really makes you think about the lasting impacts of those choices and how they continue to shape our world today.
It does.
Now, shifting gears to European exploration and colonization.
Okay.
These sources showcase the diverse motivations and conflicts that fueled this era. It wasn't simply about discovering new lands, was it?
Not at all.
Okay.
Think of Hernán Cortés and his conquest of the Aztecs.
Right.
While ambition and greed certainly played a role,
Of course.
his actions were also driven by a profound religious zeal. He saw himself as a soldier of God,
Okay.
spreading Christianity to new lands, even if it meant resorting to brutal tactics.
He represents a complex mix of motivations, doesn't he?
He does.
And the sources also highlight the Spanish Armada's defeat in 1588,
Yeah.
framing it within a larger religious war
Right.
between Protestant England and Catholic Spain.
And what's fascinating is that this conflict wasn't confined to Europe.
Right.
It had global repercussions with battles erupting in the Americas.
Wow.
And attempts to disrupt trade routes in Asia.
So they were already fighting a global war.
They were.
That's incredible.
This shows how interconnected the world already was even back then.
It seems like those early global empires were already clashing.
They were.
Setting a precedent for future conflicts. And for those Europeans who did manage to reach the New World, the reality was often far harsher than the romanticized stories we sometimes hear.
Yes. The sources use Henry Percy's account of Jamestown to illustrate that harsh reality.
Okay.
He describes a desperate struggle for survival, rampant disease, constant hunger, and conflict with Native Americans.
That's awful.
It's a far cry from the tales of easy riches and abundant opportunities.
It's a stark reminder that colonization was a brutal and unforgiving process.
It was.
Now, the French took a slightly different approach to colonizing the Americas, didn't they?
They did.
What were their primary goals and methods?
The French were far more interested in trade, especially establishing vast fur trading networks with Native Americans.
Well, interesting.
They also developed sugar plantations in the West Indies, relying heavily on enslaved African labor.
So while their approach differed from the Spanish, they still ultimately relied on exploitation to achieve their economic goals. It's interesting to see those patterns emerge.
It's a recurring theme, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to acknowledge the impact of these European powers on the indigenous populations. While the sources highlight the interdependence between Europeans and Native Americans in the fur trade, we also see the devastating consequences of land disputes and cultural clashes.
Conflicts like King Philip's War were incredibly brutal.
They were.
And reshaped the English perception of Native Americans.
Yeah.
It's a dark chapter that fueled the dehumanization of indigenous people.
Right.
Paving the way for further violence and displacement.
And it's vital to remember that these weren't isolated incidents.
Right.
They were part of a much larger pattern of colonialism that continues to have repercussions today.
Moving into the 17th and 18th centuries, we see those tensions between the colonists in England escalate, eventually leading to the American Revolution.
Right.
But it wasn't just about taxes and representation, was it?
No, it was a much more complex brew of grievances and ideologies.
Take, for example, the establishment of Santa Fe in 1610.
Okay.
The Spanish were pushing northward.
Right.
But New Mexico didn't offer the instant riches they'd hoped for.
So it challenges that simplistic image of Spanish conquistadors solely fixated on gold, doesn't it?
It does.
What other factors were at play?
Well, religion was a powerful motivator.
Okay.
The Spanish saw themselves as bringing Catholicism to the New World.
Right.
But their efforts to convert indigenous populations often met with resistance and cultural clashes.
And on the English side, we see religion driving the Puritan settlers in New England.
Right.
They were seeking religious freedom, but also sought to establish their own strict form of Christianity.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
The desire for religious freedom often went hand in hand with the desire to impose one's own beliefs on others.
And then there's the Great Awakening.
Yeah.
This wave of religious revival that swept through the colonies during the 18th century.
Right.
How did that contribute to the growing sense of American identity? The Great Awakening challenged the established churches and fostered a more emotional and personal approach to faith.
Okay.
This resonated with colonists from different backgrounds and regions, creating a shared experience that helps solidify a sense of collective identity.
It seems like a key ingredient in the recipe for revolution.
It was.
And during this period, we see figures like Benjamin Franklin emerge, embodying the Enlightenment spirit in America.
Franklin was a true polymath.
Yeah.
His insatiable curiosity led him to excel in science, literature, and politics.
And it seems like he really was in everything, wasn't he?
He was. He championed self-governance and pushed the boundaries of knowledge, reflecting the evolving aspirations of the colonies.
His ideas, combined with the growing spirit of independence fostered by the Great Awakening and other factors, set the stage for a dramatic showdown with England.
The seeds of revolution had been sown.
And those seeds would soon blossom into a full-blown war for independence. But before we get to the revolution itself, there are a few other fascinating developments we need to explore.
Right.
Absolutely. We'll delve into those in the next part of our deep dive.
All right.
Stay tuned.
Sounds good. As tensions mounted between the colonies and Great Britain, one policy that often gets overlooked is the Proclamation Line of 1763. It's a fascinating example of how seemingly well-intentioned policies can backfire spectacularly.
Right after the French and Indian War, the British drew this line along the Appalachian Mountains, essentially barring colonists from settling lands west of that boundary.
On the surface, it seemed like a measure to prevent further conflicts with Native Americans.
Okay.
But for many colonists, it felt like a slap in the face.
Yeah, I can imagine.
A blatant restriction on their freedom and a barrier to economic opportunities.
They had just fought alongside the British to secure these territories.
Right.
And now they were being told they couldn't even settle them.
Exactly.
I can see how that would breed resentment.
Precisely. And that resentment only grew with the passage of the Stamp Act in 1765.
Right.
This was no longer about distant land disputes.
Okay.
It was a direct attack on their wallets.
Yeah.
And a violation of what they saw as their fundamental rights as British subjects.
The cry of no taxation without representation became a rallying cry for the colonists.
Yeah, exactly.
This wasn't just an abstract political concept anymore.
Yeah.
It was impacting their daily lives, their businesses, their sense of autonomy.
The Stamp Act forced the colonists to confront a fundamental question. Did they truly have the same rights and freedoms as those living in England?
Right.
If they could be taxed without their consent, what other liberties were at stake?
And it wasn't just about the money itself, was it?
No.
It was about the principle of the matter.
Exactly. The colonists saw the Stamp Act as a symptom of a much larger problem.
Okay.
The system of mercantilism that they believed was designed to benefit Britain at their expense. They felt like they were being treated as a source of raw materials and a captive market for British goods, rather than as equal partners in the empire.
And then, of course, we have the Boston Tea Party.
Right.
Which was a symbolic act of defiance.
Yes.
But also a shrewd business move by colonial merchants.
It's often portrayed as this dramatic act of rebellion.
Yeah.
But there was a calculated economic motive at play as well.
Right.
By destroying the tea, these merchants were protesting the Tea Act, which they saw as a threat to their own profits, and a way for the British East India Company to establish a monopoly.
So it was a clever way to frame their resistance as a defense of liberty.
Exactly.
While also protecting their own economic interests.
Right.
And once the fighting actually began, it was far from a guaranteed victory for the Americans.
The early years of the Revolution were particularly difficult for the Continental Army.
I bet.
They lacked experienced resources and often faced demoralizing defeats. That's what makes Washington's surprise attacks at Trenton and Princeton.
Right.
In the winter of 1776-1777, so significant.
He took a huge gamble going against the traditional military tactics of the time.
He did.
But it paid off, didn't it?
Absolutely. These victories were crucial in boosting morale and demonstrating that the Continental Army was capable of outmaneuvering the British.
Okay.
It was a much-needed turning point in the war.
But even with those victories, the Americans wouldn't have succeeded without a little help from their friends across the Atlantic.
That's right. The role of France cannot be overstated.
Right.
Their financial and military support was instrumental in tipping the scales in favor of the Americans.
Wow.
It's a reminder that even revolutions are rarely won in isolation. They often rely on alliances and global power dynamics.
So the Americans managed to secure their independence.
They did.
But now they face the daunting task of creating a new nation from scratch.
Right.
These sources delve into the Constitutional Convention and the debates that shaped the very foundations of American government.
Yeah.
It seems like there were some pretty intense disagreements right from the start.
Oh, absolutely. The delegates to the Constitutional Convention represented a diverse range of interests and ideologies.
Right.
You had the Federalists, like Alexander Hamilton, who advocated for a strong central government capable of providing stability and unity.
They were concerned that a weak central government, like the one under the Articles of Confederation, would lead to chaos and disunity.
Exactly. But on the other side, you had the anti-federalists like Thomas Jefferson, who were deeply suspicious of concentrated power. They feared that a powerful federal government could easily become tyrannical and infringe upon individual liberties.
So they pushed for a Bill of Rights to explicitly protect those liberties from government overreach.
Precisely. And that tension between federal power and individual rights is a theme that runs throughout American history. We're still grappling with those same questions today.
It's fascinating how those early debates continue to resonate centuries later.
It is.
But even after the Constitution was ratified, the new nation faced a barrage of challenges, both from within and from abroad.
The quasi-war with France in the late 1790s is a great example.
Yeah.
It highlighted the complexities of navigating international relations in a world where empires were constantly vying for power and influence.
And domestically, the Alien and Sedition Acts passed during that same period really tested the boundaries of free speech.
Those acts were incredibly controversial.
Yeah, they were.
They were ostensibly intended to protect national security, but many saw them as a blatant attempt to silence political dissent and consolidate power.
Right.
They raised serious questions about the balance between national security and individual liberties.
Yeah.
A debate that continues to this day, especially in our age of terrorism and social media.
It seems like the young nation was walking a tightrope, trying to find its footing on the world stage while also grappling with internal divisions.
It was a precarious time full of uncertainty and risk.
Yeah.
But there were also moments of bold decision-making that would profoundly shape the nation's future.
Okay.
One such moment was the Louisiana Purchase in 1803.
That was a game changer, wasn't it?
It was.
Doubling the size of the United States and opening up vast new territories for exploration and expansion.
It's interesting because Thomas Jefferson, who orchestrated the purchase,
Right.
was a staunch advocate for limited government. Yet he recognized the strategic and economic importance of acquiring the Louisiana territory,
Right.
even if it meant stretching his own political principles.
It shows that even the most principled leaders sometimes have to make pragmatic choices,
They do.
especially when faced with such a transformative opportunity.
And the Louisiana Purchase had far-reaching consequences, paving the way for westward expansion, intensifying conflicts with Native Americans,
Right.
and ultimately contributing to the deep divisions that would lead to the Civil War.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Revolution, constitution building, westward expansion,
Right.
political clashes, international intrigue. But there's another crucial aspect of early American history we need to delve into.
Okay.
The rise of industrialization in the North and its profound impact on American society. The Industrial Revolution really reshaped the landscape of the North.
It did.
But it wasn't an overnight transformation.
Right.
These sources point to the putting out system
Yeah.
as a crucial stepping stone on that path to industrialization.
The putting out system was this fascinating hybrid model,
Okay.
bridging the gap between traditional craft production and the factory system. Merchants would provide raw materials to families who work from their homes,
Okay.
spinning thread, weaving cloth, or making shoes.
Right.
Once the goods were completed, the merchants would collect and sell them,
Right.
essentially acting as intermediaries.
So it retained elements of home-based work.
Yeah.
But with a crucial shift in control,
Right.
those merchants were like proto-capitalists, organizing and profiting from the labor of others.
Precisely. And this system created a market for goods produced outside the traditional household setting,
Right.
laying the groundwork for the larger scale factory production that would soon follow.
And when those factories arrived, they didn't just change the way goods were produced.
Right.
They changed the fabric of society itself.
They did.
The sources focus on the Lowell factory girls as a prime example of this new industrial workforce.
Okay.
Can you tell us a bit more about them?
These were primarily young women from rural New England
Okay.
who sought work in booming factory towns like Lowell, Massachusetts.
Right.
They lived in company-owned boarding houses, adhering to strict schedules that dictated their work and leisure time.
It was a dramatic shift from the agrarian lifestyle they were accustomed to.
It was.
While it offered some degree of economic independence,
Yeah.
it also came with its own set of challenges, didn't it?
Absolutely. The sources paint a picture of long working hours, meager wages, and often dangerous conditions within those factories.
It's easy to imagine these women as passive victims of this new system.
Right.
But that wasn't the case, was it?
Not at all.
Okay.
They organized and protested, demanding better treatment and fair wages.
Wow.
They formed labor unions, published newspapers, and even went on strike,
Right.
pushing back against the exploitation they faced.
It's a powerful reminder that the struggle for workers' rights has deep roots in American history,
It does.
dating back to the very beginnings of industrialization.
Their actions challenge this notion that progress and profit should come at the expense of human well-being. They forced society to confront the ethical dilemmas embedded within this new economic order.
It seems like those tensions between opportunity and exploitation were woven into the very fabric of industrialization.
Were.
And those tensions weren't confined to the factory floor.
Right.
The Panic of 1819, the first major economic depression in the United States,
Right.
exposed the inherent instabilities of this rapidly evolving economy.
It's almost eerie how some things never seem to change.
I know it's true.
Just like the economic crises we see today.
Yeah.
The Panic of 1819 was fueled by speculation, risky loans,
Right.
and a sudden evaporation of confidence in the market.
Exactly. It serves as a potent reminder that even during periods of booming economic growth,
Right.
there are often underlying vulnerabilities that can lead to sudden and devastating downturns.
Absolutely.
And as the North continued to industrialize, transportation became a crucial factor in connecting markets and fueling further expansion.
Right.
The sources highlight the transportation revolution as a pivotal development in this era.
The expansion of roads, canals, and railroads dramatically reshaped the American landscape.
Yeah.
Not only did these new transportation networks make it easier and more affordable to transport goods,
Right.
they also facilitated the movement of people, leading to increased migration and a surge in westward expansion.
So it was more than just a physical transformation.
Right.
It was a cultural and economic shift as well, connecting people and ideas across vast distances.
And this period also witnessed the rise of Andrew Jackson.
Okay.
And his brand of populist politics, which appealed directly to the common man.
Jackson was a war hero.
He was.
And he championed democratic ideals and individual liberty.
Right.
He presented himself as a man of the people, in contrast to the elites who had dominated politics for so long.
But he was also a deeply controversial figure, known for his aggressive tactics and his support for policies that often benefited white settlers at the expense of Native Americans.
Yeah, it's a complicated legacy.
This legacy is a complex one full of contradictions.
It seems like a fitting reflection of this entire period.
Yeah.
A time of immense change marked by progress and setbacks, innovation and exploitation, hope and disillusionment.
Early American history is a tapestry woven from these intricate threads, often messy and contradictory, but always compelling.
It's incredible how much we've uncovered just from these textbook excerpts.
It is.
It's like we've only scratched the surface of this vast and fascinating historical landscape.
And that's the beauty of history.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing exploration, an endless source of insights and revelations.
Right.
These sources have provided a starting point, a foundation upon which you can continue to build your own understanding.
Exactly. We encourage you to delve deeper into the topics that piqued your curiosity.
Right.
What surprised you?
Yeah.
What questions do you still have? What connections can you make to the world we live in today?
History is a conversation, not a monologue.
Right.
It's about engaging with the past, challenging assumptions, and drawing meaningful connections to our present.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy digging.